The radical left's agendas are challenging American values, but conservatives like you haven't forgotten what this country was built on. My friends, the Heritage Foundation exists to make sure your voice is heard and to represent your values in the D.C. swamp. The Heritage Foundation stands for your values and won't give up the fight because they know you never will. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. Well, unless you're deaf, dumb, and blind, I guess, you're unaware that the president has been meeting with Vladimir Putin. It'll soon be 3 hours. He's got two aides with him, Witkoff and Rubio, and Putin has two aides with him. So something's going on. If nothing was going on, I think it'd probably be over by now. I don't know what, obviously. And I don't like speculating. But I'll tell you what I do like. You and I, I'm sure, think alike about this. I have complete faith in the president being in this meeting. Complete faith. It's not just his skills in negotiating deals, and he always seems to come out on top, doesn't he? It's his common sense. His common sense. Now, it's very, very important, whatever comes out of this, the Ukraine retains the ability geographically to defend itself. To defend itself. It's also important to understand that Putin, economically, Russia is in a very severe state. And it's relying on a lot of help from communist China, from India, for resources, for purchasing their oil. 70% of the Russian economy is under Putin's control. 70%. And he likes to take a big chunk out of it for his own benefit. And what else has happened here? The Russian military has really been brutalized by Putin. And Ukraine has done an unbelievable job of fighting against Russia. You know, there's a lot of talk about how much money is going into Ukraine and so forth and so on. I get it. But we poured a lot of money into other places too, like Afghanistan. And we did a lot of the fighting. We sent our troops in there for years and years and years. We don't have any troops in Ukraine. Those people are fighting themselves. Russia has had to rely on others, including North Korea, to even send troops. So the Ukrainian people want to be free. They don't want to live under the police state of Russia. This is very important to know, too. Now, what's happening as I speak is that Russia is trying to aggressively as possible take some more territory. Since this war began, Russia has picked up about 1% more territory, Mr. Producer. Did you know that? 1%. And it has had over 1 million casualties, 250,000 of which are deaths. As I explained the other day, that's 5 Vietnams, 4.5 Vietnams in 3.5 years. 3.5 years. And the Ukrainians have not really had offensive weapons either with which to strike Russia, although they have stricken Russia with drones and things of that sort and weapons that they've made and harnessed in a certain way. I don't think Putin cares how many soldiers he loses. Stalin didn't care about how many soldiers he lost. He lost millions of his own people, millions. And it was part of a strategy. In fact, one of the ways he helped the beginning of the defeat of the Nazis was he sucked the Nazis in. They came within 10 miles of Moscow, and then he surrounded their army. But the result was the death of hundreds of thousands of civilians. Even before war broke out with the Nazis, Stalin slaughtered millions of his own people, especially the Ukrainians. Especially the Ukrainians. The only dictator in Russia to hold power more than Vladimir Putin is Stalin. Putin is the longest-serving dictator, except for Stalin, in Russia. We talked about some of this. Putin doesn't have a Politburo. Putin makes all the calls. He makes all the decisions. There's not a communist party that he has to answer to. He doesn't have to answer to anybody. He's an all-powerful fascist. He learned a lot when he was a lieutenant colonel in the KGB working with the Stasi in East Germany. And in fact, the way he took over was blackmailing Yeltsin. Yeltsin, who was a drunk but a good man, he'd accused him of a number of crimes, and he told Yeltsin, you step down, you appoint me, then step down, and I will not pursue those. I will erase the blackboard. And that's what happened. He's killed every serious person who's questioning his authority, whether they be journalists, whether they be generals, whether they be opposition party. Regardless, that's what he's done. He has written, or people have written for him at length, and he's discussed at length how virtually all of Europe used to be Russian, the way he puts it. But certainly Ukraine and Georgia, the Baltic states, Poland, Romania, Moldova, many of these are NATO countries. In order to expand what he wants to expand, which is the territorial control, and by the way, Russia in and of itself is a massive country. Just look at the map. They have 5 or 6 time zones. It's a massive country. He would have to go through Ukraine. That's why Ukraine is so important. It's important for a lot of reasons, but it's important to make sure he can't. Donald Trump is also a student of history. Now, listening to the media, you wouldn't know that, but he is. And as I've told you many times, he has the official portrait of Ronald Reagan over his left shoulder in the Oval Office. It's not that he talks about Reagan that much, but he is a fan of Reagan. And you remember Reagan walked out on Gorbachev when Gorbachev insisted over and over again that he had to get rid of the Strategic Defense Initiative or they couldn't make a nuclear deal. And they were going to make a massive nuclear deal. At home, Reagan was under enormous pressure. People called it Star Wars, called it a fiction. Always attacked Reagan's intelligence, even though he was enormously intelligent and read a great deal. He said, no, we're not going to give that up. Not now, not ever. And he walked away. It was very famous. He walked out and he walked away. He said he was very disappointed. You could see it on his face. Came so close to a deal. People have written about it. People who were in on that meeting. Marlene Fitzwater has written about it. The late Marlene Fitzwater have others. It took a lot of courage to do that. Donald Trump is aware of that. He's well aware of it. There were going on 3 hours as this meeting has begun. I don't know if it's going well. I don't know if it's going poorly. I don't know. Nobody does. But I know Putin is nobody to be trusted. And so does the president. So does Rubio, I'm sure. So does Witkoff, I'm sure. The president has already done some very brilliant things in his second term in the 7 months he's been in office. He's built up NATO by forcing NATO to build up itself. It's incredible. NATO is now bigger and more powerful than it's ever been. It has more members. It's doing more to defend itself and build its own military as a result of Donald Trump. We now have and will have access to rare earth materials in Ukraine, which will help Ukraine and help the United States. And we'll have to factor into any discussion about the security of Ukraine, because that's part of the deal. And if Ukraine ceases to exist, then we don't get any of those materials which are intended to help pay us back. We're not paying any more money. The Europeans are. The Europeans are going to buy weapons from us and provide them to the Ukrainians. And our president has made more types of weapons available to the Europeans to purchase for the Ukrainians, including weapons that are more offensive in nature. Not completely, but more so. More so. As for Putin, what do you folks think? His military has never been weaker. His finances, that is the country's finances, are a disaster. He has not accomplished what he wanted to accomplish in Kiev. I mean, so far it's been a disaster for him. The problem is he'll throw more men, more and more, at Ukraine. The other problem is Russia has over 140 million people. Ukraine, at the beginning of this fight, had a little over 40 million, about 44 million, and many of them have left. I mean, Ukraine is a relatively small country, a very well-educated population. And of course, Putin's focus is on destroying the population centers, destroying the infrastructure, bringing Ukraine to its knees. But apparently that's not where Ukraine intends to be. Now, some heads up about the program. We have two great guests lined up. Dan Hoffman, who was CIA bureau chief in Russia in hour 2, and Senator Tom Cotton, who's the chairman, I believe, of the Armed Services Committee in the Senate, in hour 3. That said, heads up to all of our affiliates, if there is a press conference, whether it's both leaders or just President Trump, we are going to take it live and we are going to break through our commercials. So be prepared. We will take it live and we will break through our commercials. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Folks, we're less than a year from the 250th birthday of our great nation. But sadly, far too many have forgotten what this country stands for. Why? Because they forgot or were never even taught how this country was founded, why it was founded, and who founded it. If we lose our heritage, we lose America. That's why the Heritage Foundation needs your help. They've created a resource not just to ensure that patriots like you don't forget about the American founding, but to equip Americans with the facts they've never learned in school. This resource, Why the American Founding Matters, explores the question of why it's so important to study the American founding and why the founding still matters today. Folks, don't wait. Get your free copy of this essay today at heritage.org/Levin, heritage.org/Levin. Now, included in this resource is a comprehensive timeline of the American founding from 1774 to 1800. You need to read it, folks, and so does everyone you know. So go to heritage.org/Levin now. That's heritage.org/Levin. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation. Looks like the potential for a press conference of some kind is imminent. So we will not be taking the bottom of the hour break. I tell all those affiliates and anybody else to whom that matters, because we want to be right on top of this. And while we're waiting, you know, when you think about Alaska, it's really actually quite interesting. Right after the Civil War, it was purchased by us. The Secretary of State, William Seward, under then Andrew Johnson, who was president because Lincoln had been assassinated, he pursued this like a priority. Now, what Russia had been trying to do was to expand its trade and its settlements all along the Pacific coast of North America, including what would later become the United States. And it wanted to become a great power. Now, even back then, we were aware of this, and we were concerned that it could become a great power in the Asian Pacific region. Now, the Russia Tsar, they've had czars a long time in the 1700s. Even back then, they were looking at exploring the West Coast, but that included Alaska, which was Russian. Now think about how big Russia is now. Think about if they had Alaska, and think about our situation if they had Alaska. Sometimes history is really fascinating, usually. So they wanted to keep Alaska and so forth. It was very rich in natural resources even back then. But our country was expanding westward too, starting in the early 1800s. And so we were actually competing with Russians, Americans competing with Russians as explorers and traders. The problem for what Russia was, it lacked the money to effectively settle the area, certainly permanently. And so they couldn't do that. And the Russians, in the Crimean War, they lost. They didn't have any money. So they began to lose interest in the whole area. But they were looking for funds, the Tsar was. The Tsar of that period. So they offered to sell Alaska in 1859 to the United States. But soon thereafter, the Civil War broke out in full. And of course, that wasn't the focus of the United States. But then after the Civil War, the Secretary of State, William Seward, circled back. He was concerned about the influence of Great Britain. The influence of Great Britain. Because Great Britain, as you know, was an empire, and it was very interested in the West Coast. And so what happened was, there was some negotiation, and the Russians offered the United States the opportunity to buy Alaska for $7.2 million. $7.2 million. had to be a treaty. We don't do treaties anymore, of course. And the treaty passed the Senate. And so Andrew Johnson signed the treaty, 1867, May 28, and we purchased it for $7.2 million. And it was formally transferred to the United States a few months later. And Russia was no longer a presence in North America. And it ensured, as Americans continue to move westward, it ensured that North America would be American. It was a big deal. Now, it was called Seward's Folly for some 25, 30 years after the purchase, after the Secretary of State who negotiated it. Because people thought, well, what the hell is up in Alaska? You know what happened, Mr. Producer? They found gold. They found gold. So it became a big mining location. This idea of Seward's Folly. So they found a massive gold deposit, major gold deposit, in the Yukon Territory of Alaska in 1896. And Alaska became a gateway to what they call the Klondike goldfields. And so the strategic importance from a mineral point of view was obvious. But come World War II, the strategic importance was very, very much highlighted. Our ships could have access relatively easily. Very important. So important did Alaska become, it didn't stay as a territory. We made it a state. It became a state on January 3rd, 1959. Now you know a brief history of Alaska. And I spoke to the president last week about another matter that he wanted to discuss. And I said, you know, Mr. President, the Russians are very envious that we have Alaska. They still eyeball it in a way. They know they can never get it back. He said, yeah, it's pretty funny. Putin always brings that up to me. In a joking way. In a joking way. So there you have Alaska. Now, just so you know, many of you are in your cars. There is, we are told imminently, but we don't know what that means, a press conference that will be held. We don't know if it's Trump and Putin or just Trump, but I can tell you that there are two podiums. So I suspect the two of them will be there. I think, you want me to take out my crystal ball? I think, I could be dead wrong. I think they're going to talk about, if I had to guess, that some good progress has been made. There's a lot of differences. But enough progress has been made for a second meeting. Perhaps the second meeting at this point will include Zelensky, because obviously we can negotiate with the Russians all we want, but Zelensky's going to have to be there, and that's important too. There's been a lot of effort by the isolationists in our country. You know who they are. I've talked about them at length. To paint Zelensky as the bad guy and Putin as the good guy. It's pretty sick. Just as they now paint Hamas as the good guy and Israel's the bad guy. Iran is the good guy and Israel's the bad guy. I hear some of the skeptics who are very concerned about Donald Trump taking out Iran's nuclear sites, pretending they never said such things. Talking about all the peace deals and ceasefires Donald Trump has already entered into, including 6, and they count Iran as one of them. And I scratch my head at these fake MAGA isolationists. I think to myself, I was in the middle of a brutal battle with these people. I was the one backing the President of the United States and supporting what I thought would be his effort to do exactly what he did. They were not. It's funny how they forget these things. Or rewrite them, if you will. Yet again, you're seeing Donald Trump in action. You're seeing what he is and what he isn't. He's not an isolationist, or he wouldn't care about any of this. In fact, you might even ask yourselves, now that he helped build up NATO and forced NATO to build up itself, now that NATO is to buy weapons from us to give to the Ukrainians, now that we have a foothold in their rare earth minerals in Ukraine, why do we care anymore about what's going on? It's Europe's problem. At some point, that may be the case. But look how he's trying, working hard to bring peace in that region. He's not an isolationist. He never was. He's not what these people claim he is. He never was. He wouldn't use Reagan's phrase, peace through strength. He would just be a pacifist appeaser. And he's not. Because he understands how dangerous that is. He understands what message that would send to communist China, among others. It's important to remember this. Because he's not one of them. He's not one of these phony influencers or podcasters or whatever who gin up their numbers, who make you pretend that they have a tremendous amount of influence. You saw that piece I read to you the other day that they have almost no influence. And also that their numbers are overstated. Our numbers here are not overstated. They are what they are. Same rating system we've had God knows how long. Consider that Donald Trump, he didn't have to in his first term, attack Syrian sites when Assad, the dictator, was there because he was gassing children and innocent civilians. So we sent cruise missiles there, around 60 of them, and hit some of these Syrian sites that were also Russian sites. He took out Soleimani, the head of the Iranian so-called Republican Guard. He went after ISIS. ISIS really didn't have a whole lot to do with us directly, did it? He took out Baghdadi. He's not an isolationist. He's not an interventionist. That is, he's not looking for little wars to get involved in either. Nor should he. Nor should any president. What he's been doing is incredibly balanced. It is America first. But people need to understand what America first means. You're seeing it this evening. You're seeing it play out this evening. This is what Donald Trump is about. Now, how did we get to this point? It's Putin who asked to meet. How did we get to this point where Putin wanted to meet with Trump? Because Donald Trump has done something else that's brilliant. It's a long list. He's used our economic power the way Reagan used our economic power, in ways that most presidents don't even think about. He sees that Russia, specifically Putin, that his economy is teetering. He also sees that he's getting an influx of money, cash, from the Indians, as well as the communist Chinese. So what does he do? First of all, Iran is no longer in any position to sell oil, to buy anything from Russia. And because they were hit by the Israelis, and then their nuclear sites were hit as they were, they have a whole problem with their infrastructure. They're even having problems providing water to their citizens. They're now involved, by the way, the regime there, in a massive roundup of innocents and slaughtering them, executing them on the spot. What's going on internally is horrific. North Korea is having to send in troops. They're fodder. They send them in and they get mowed down. They're not trained well. They're not equipped well. So they're getting slaughtered on the battlefield, and Putin's pushing them out in front even of his Russian troops. Un doesn't give a damn either. You know, it's interesting in my book, I explain, they don't care about individuals. They don't care about the citizenry. They just don't. And so this is what you get. Whether they're Marxist regimes or fascist regimes, this is what you get. There's no opposition. There's no opposition. And so he tells India, doesn't just tell them, he slaps a 50% tariff on them because they're they're buying oil from Russia. He says, look, you can buy it from us, buy it from the Middle East, you can't buy it from them. But India has had a long relationship with Russia because Russia and India have had an alliance against what used to be Pakistan and the United States. Now we have a relationship with Pakistan and India. And then the president said, if this continues, we're going to put a massive tariff on China. We tried it once. It had an enormously negative impact on China. Then he pulled it off because they were negotiating deals. But he said, I'll do what I have to do. And then thirdly, the president said, I'm going to put secondary sanctions. He already has primary sanctions. Secondary sanctions on Russia. So he could collapse the entire economy of Russia the way Reagan almost collapsed the entire economy of Russia because they couldn't keep up with the Strategic Defense Initiative. Does this sound like an isolationist to you? He's not an isolationist. But he's not a guy who's looking to create wars. And this is why he says over and over and over again, if I had been president, Russia never would have invaded Ukraine. Now, is that true? It's 100% true. You see, Russia saw a number of things. We've all talked about this. Others have too. The withdrawal from Afghanistan sent a signal around the world, particularly to Putin, that Biden is weak. He's not going to do a damn thing. Nothing. That was a humiliation like America's never suffered before. Right there on television. And we lost some wonderful men and women. So, Putin saw that as a cowardly act, and it was. What else? He didn't believe Biden would help provide the kind of arms that Ukraine needed. Obama didn't. You know who did? Trump. The Javelin missiles, which take out these tanks. But Biden didn't and wouldn't. What else did he see? Well, it's what he heard. He'd amassed 150, 200,000 troops, tanks, and everything else on the border with Ukraine. He was prepared to invade. And Biden effectively said, well, if they take a little bit of land, that's one thing. But if they really take a lot, and Biden's comments were outrageous. And they sent a signal. They sent a signal to Putin, and he invaded. Trump has sent opposite signals. You know, when we bombed those nuclear sites, we said at the time, the whole world is watching. The whole world is watching, and the whole world was watching, including Putin. When he decided that NATO, which was now muscling up 5% of their GDP, that's a lot of money, that they were going to buy arms from us, and that we were going to sell them even more powerful weapons and more offensive capable weapons, he noticed, he saw. That made a difference. When Trump created the Space Force, it had been in the Air Force, he broke it out and said, you know what? The Communist Chinese have built killer satellites to take out our satellites, our eyes, during time of war. The Russians are doing the same thing. I'm creating a Space Force, and we're going to produce our own types of satellites that we need to protect us in space. That got their attention. When Trump told Panama, you either kick out the communist Chinese, you gave them contracts to run both ends of the Panama Canal, either do that or we're taking it by force because we built it, it belongs to us. Well, they capitulated. The Chinese were moved out. The Chinese saw that. Putin saw it. They all saw it. What else? The president has talked about Greenland. Why does he care about Greenland? Why does anybody care about Greenland? Because the Russians and the communist Chinese are building military bases in the Arctic Circle. Greenland makes it possible to create navigable lanes for us, not only to the Arctic Circle, but to combat and confront whatever comes out of the Arctic Circle. What else did he do? In the big, beautiful bill, there are billions of dollars in there to buy these modern, huge icebreakers for the Coast Guard. Why? So they can be used around the Arctic Circle and around Greenland. That's why. In Donald Trump's first term, he significantly increased military spending because Obama had undermined the military and spending for the military. In this budget, he's significantly increasing spending on the military. Why? Because Biden did the same thing. We now have in our all-volunteer military more people volunteering to serve than there are positions for them. When he came into office, other than the Marine Corps, we couldn't get enough pilots, couldn't get enough infantry, and so forth. Now we are. He's turned the country around. Our enemies either respect us or they fear us, or both. He doesn't do this Fortress America stuff that Ronald Reagan used to condemn. He doesn't believe in that. When he and Putin met on the tarmac a few hours back and they were walking towards whatever building they were walking towards for their meeting, there was a stealth bomber and fighter jets that flew overhead, timed for the purpose of sending a message. Here we are. That's Donald Trump. Does he deserve a Nobel Peace Prize? Of course. Does it matter? Not really. I think it's the Netherlands that give the countries there that give it out. But, you know, Barack Obama got it for finding the men's room on his first 12 hours in the White House. Something to that effect. So what's going to come of this? What are they going to tell us? I suspect it's something relatively positive, but obviously I don't know, and there's no point in speculating. But it's also true that everything can't be resolved in one sit-down, and certainly nothing's going to be totally resolved without Zelensky in Ukraine present. So I suspect that's the next part of this. Even where they met in Alaska, the president said, no, we're not going to Sweden, we're not going to any of these other, we're going to meet in the United States. He wants to meet, we're going to meet in the United States. Alaska's kind of halfway. You know, the flight from Washington to Alaska, I think, is about 6 hours. The flight from Moscow to Alaska is about 6 hours, and there you go. I like it because, you know, you guys used to have this, but we own it now because we bought it pennies on the dollar. Nothing like that will ever happen again. That's for sure. Now, here's one thing I just want to make abundantly clear, at least from my perspective. Putin is a killer. Putin cannot be trusted. Putin has violated every every deal he's ever made. In fact, he's violated deals that have been made by Gorbachev. We have to be very careful that Putin doesn't try and create a scenario where the current administration, strong, led by a great president, agrees to something that a subsequent administration that will not be as strong, will not have as great a president, either will not or cannot uphold or will not enforce if Putin, should he be alive back then, take steps. I mean, Ukraine is going to have to be able to defend itself. In 1994, it gave up all of its nukes. It was 1/3 of the Soviet Empire's nukes. It gave it up, gave them to Russia. 1994. In exchange, they had an agreement called the Brussels Agreement that the United States, Russia, and Great Britain would actually defend Ukraine's borders. Well, you see how that went. Not well. And Bill Clinton made a big deal out of it, gave a big speech. They just felt there were too many of these now free, formerly captive states, that's what they were called, with nuclear weapons. But the bulk of Russia's nuclear weapons were in Ukraine, as well as its launchers, its missile sites, its trucks, its mobile trucks, and so forth and so on. So they gave them, that is, the missiles and the mobile launchers, to the Russians in exchange for agreement, which, of course, Putin has broken. And lest we forget, Putin invaded Georgia, another formerly captive state, and took 25 to 30% of that country. Putin invaded Crimea, which was clearly Ukrainian, on the Black Sea, and he took 100% of that. Putin sent individuals into eastern Ukraine to start a sort of under-the-radar war there, which is what he did. Took about 19-20% of Ukraine. And since the invasion in 2022, February, he's only taken about 1% more because the Ukrainians are hell of fighters. Now, I see that this press conference is about to get underway. As I said, as soon as it starts, we're going to go directly to it, Mr. Producer, correct? We're going to blow out everything. But I see a lot of activity there, including some of the people who may have been in the meeting with the president and with Putin. We shall see. What interests me also in this is what everybody has been saying before the meeting. Yeah, now I see in the audience our Secretary of Defense. I see Labrock, the longtime hatchet man, foreign policy. They're effectively their Secretary of State for Russia. So it's just a matter of time here. But what I was going to say, it's interesting to hear what some people have to say, during the course of the meeting or before the meeting and so forth. If you'll notice, I've been very sober and cautious about my comments. Speculation a little bit based on what we know, historically, based on what we know about the personalities. But it's not news for people to speculate and just comment on what they think is going to happen, which is what they're still doing. This meeting went on for 3.5 hours. Very interesting. 3.5 hours. So something happened, but not everything. Let's see here. Ukraine, breaking news, Ukraine is to make decisions about ceding territory. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but we're about to find out. Just need to be very careful about that. Ceding territory. Ukraine is the victim.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Here we go.
Our negotiations
Going live.
have been held in a constructive atmosphere of mutual respect. We had very thorough negotiations that were quite useful. I would like to thank once again my American counterpart for the proposal to travel out here to Alaska. It only makes sense that we've met here because our countries, though separated by the oceans, are close neighbors. So when we've met, when I came out of the plane and I've said, "Good afternoon, dear neighbor, very good to see you, in good health, and to see you alive." I think that is very neighborly. And I think that's some kind words that we can say to each other. We're separated by the Strait of Bering, though there are 2 islands only between the Russian island and the U.S. island. They're only 4 kilometers apart. We're close neighbors, and it's a fact. It's also important that Alaska has to do with our common heritage, common history between Russia and the U.S., and many positive events have to do with that territory. Still, there is tremendous cultural heritage back from the Russian America. For example, Orthodox churches and a lot of more than 700 geographical names of Russian origin. During the Second World War, it was here in Alaska that was the origin of the legendary air bridge for the supply of military aircraft and other equipment under the Lend-Lease program. It was a dangerous and treacherous route over the vast emptiness of ice. However, the pilots of both countries did everything to bring closer the victory. They risked their lives and they gave it all for the common victory. I was just in the city of Magadan in Russia, and there is a memorial there dedicated to the Russian and the U.S. pilots. And there are 2 flags, the U.S. flag and the Russian flag. And I know that here as well there is such a memorial. There is a military burial place several kilometers away from here. The Soviet pilots that buried there who died during that dangerous mission. We're thankful to the citizens and the government of the U.S. for carefully taking care of their memory. I think that's very worthy and noble. We'll always remember other historical examples when our countries defeated common enemies together in the spirit of battle camaraderie and allyship that supported each other and facilitated each other. I'm sure that this heritage will help us rebuild and foster mutually beneficial and equal ties at this new stage, even during the hardest conditions. It is known that there have been no summits between Russia and the U.S. for 4 years, and that's a long time. This time was very hard for bilateral relations, and let's be frank, they've fallen to the lowest point since the Cold War. I think that's not benefiting our countries and the world as a whole. It is apparent that sooner or later we had to amend the situation to move on from the confrontation to dialogue. And in this case, a personal meeting between the heads of state has been long overdue. Naturally, under the condition of serious and painstaking work, and this work has been done in general. Me and President Trump have very good direct contact. We've spoken multiple times. We spoke frankly on the phone. And special envoy of the president, Mr. Woodcock, traveled out to Russia several times. Our advisors and heads of foreign ministries kept in touch all the time. And you know fully well that one of the central issues was the situation around Ukraine. We see the strive of the administration and President Trump personally to help facilitate the resolution of the Ukrainian conflict. And his strive to get to the crux of the matter, to understand this history, is precious. As I've said, the situation in Ukraine has to do with fundamental threats to our security. Moreover, we've always considered the Ukrainian nation, and I've said it multiple times, a brotherly nation. However strange it may sound in these conditions, we have the same roots, and everything that's happening is a tragedy for us and terrible wound. Therefore, the country is sincerely interested in putting an end to it. At the same time, we're convinced that in order to make the settlement lasting and long-term, we need to eliminate all the primary roots the primary causes of that conflict, and we've said it multiple times, to consider all legitimate concerns of Russia and to reinstate a just balance of security in Europe and in the world on the whole. And I agree with President Trump, as he has said today, that naturally the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well. Naturally, we are prepared to work on that.
This segment of the podcast is exclusively sponsored by Pure Talk. Pure Talk offers great coverage and can save your family money on your wireless bill every single month. Go to puretalk.com to find the plan that's right for you. Thank you again for listening, and thank you so much for this sponsorship, Pure Talk.
I would like to hope that the agreement that we've reached together will help us bring closer that goal and will pave the path towards peace in Ukraine. We expect that Kiev and European capitals will perceive that constructively and that they won't throw a wrench in the works. They will not make any attempts to use some backroom dealings to conduct provocations to torpedo the nascent progress. Incidentally, when the new administration came to power, bilateral trade started to grow. It's still very symbolic. Still, we have a growth of 20%. As I've said, we have a lot of dimensions for joint work. It is clear that the U.S. and Russian investment and business cooperation has tremendous potential. Russia and the U.S. can offer each other so much in trade, digital, high-tech, and in space exploration. We see that Arctic cooperation is also very possible. And our international context, for example, between the Far East of Russia and the West Coast of the U.S. Overall, it's very important for our countries to turn the page, to go back to cooperation. It is symbolic that not far away from here, at the border between Russia and the U.S., there is a so-called international date line. I think you can step over, literally, from yesterday into tomorrow. And I hope that we'll succeed in that. In political sphere. I would like to thank President Trump for our joint work, for the well-wishing and trustworthy tone of our conversation. It's important that both sides are result-oriented, and we see that the President of the U.S. has a very clear idea of what he would like to achieve. He sincerely cares about prosperity of his nation. Still, he understands that Russia has its own national interests. I expect that today's agreements will be the starting point, not only for the solution of the Ukrainian issue, but also will help us bring back business-like and pragmatic relations between Russia and the U.S. And in the end, I would like to add one more thing. I'd like to remind you that in 2022, during the last contact with the previous administration, I tried to convince my previous American colleague that the situation should not be brought to the point of no return when it would come to hostilities. And I said it quite directly back then that it's a big mistake. Today, when President Trump is saying that if he was the president back then, there will be no war. And I'm quite sure that it would indeed be so. I can confirm that. I think that overall, me and President Trump have built a very good business-like and trustworthy contact. And I have every reason to believe that moving down this path, we can come, and the sooner the better, to the end of the conflict in Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. That was very profound, and I will say that I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott and John Ratcliffe, thank you very much. But we have some of our really great leaders. They've been doing a phenomenal job. We also have some tremendous Russian business representatives here, and I think everybody wants to deal with us. We've become the hottest country anywhere in the world in a very short period of time, and we look forward to that. We look forward to dealing. We're going to try and get this over with. We really made some great progress today. I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir. We had many tough meetings, good meetings. We were interfered with by the Russia hoax. That made it a little bit tougher to deal with, but he understood it. I think he's probably seen things like that during the course of his career. He's seen it all. But we had to put up with the Russia hoax. He knew it was a hoax, and I knew it was a hoax. But what was done was very criminal. But it made it harder for us to deal as a country in terms of the business and all of the things that we'd like to have dealt with. But we'll have a good chance when this is over. So just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened. But we had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President Putin and his entire team, who I know in many cases, other than that, whose faces I get to see all the time in the newspapers. You're almost as famous as the boss, but especially this one right over here. But we had some good meetings over the years, right? Good, productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future. But let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed, and President Putin wants to see that as much as I do. So, again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, no questions. Well, I took notes, but there weren't a lot of notes to take, I don't think, Mr. Producer. They've obviously agreed not to take any questions. So here's where we are, to wrap up. As far as we know, the president said it was productive. Some headway was made. No deal yet. That he's going to be talking to NATO. He's going to talk to Zelensky, ultimately up to him and to them. He added later that they made some great progress. Still some outstanding issues on the big issues. On the bigger issues. I assume that has to do with
Mark Levin.
How many times have you told someone, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Now, that's great advice for most things, but not so much for a cell phone. See, over time, the battery life fades, the processor can't keep up, and it's fallen in the toilet perhaps one too many times. Fortunately, thanks to Pure Talk, your cell phone is something you can replace without feeling guilty. When you switch to Pure Talk this month, they're going to give you a Samsung Galaxy A36 for free with a $35 qualifying plan. Wow, just $35 a month for talk, text, and data, and a free Samsung phone, the scratch-resistant Gorilla Glass, and a battery that lasts all day. All on America's most dependable 5G network. Look, supporting companies like Pure Talk is a really good thing. You win by cutting your cell phone bill in half. They win by hiring more Americans and helping more veterans. Make the switch in as little as 10 minutes. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/LEVIN to get your free phone today. Again, that's puretalk.com/LEVIN. Switch to my wireless company, America's wireless company, Pure Talk. Unfortunately, Dan Hoffman's been pulled out to other duty. You know, I'm thinking about this. press conference, we didn't learn a hell of a lot from this press conference. Other than Putin says twice that there's an agreement. Today there's an agreement. Understanding. The president said it was productive, no deal yet. So that kind of conflicts. Because he used to talk to NATO and Zelensky. He said some great progress was made. There are outstanding issues, bigger issues, extremely productive. And I said my first impression to you was that the president has taken a position more of a mediator. That doesn't mean he's not an advocate plus a mediator. And he's obviously taken the position that it's better not to speak out about these different things before he speaks to NATO and Zelensky. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's really the only way to go, quite frankly. The only way to go as far as I can tell. So I wouldn't read too much into that either, other than I think the president said going in that, look, basically this isn't our war, but we care about the people who are dying, and we care about the, the geopolitical issues and so forth and so on, but really Zelensky and NATO in the end are going to have to make these decisions. Does that make sense, Rich? I think that's pretty much what's going on here. The meeting was productive. I wonder what you folks think about this. What's your first impression? Not wild-eyed speculation. What's your first impression? I think a lot of people thought there'd be a different type of announcement with a little bit more substance. But clearly the parties have decided that's not particularly useful. So that's what I get out of this. That's what I get out of this. So there's no point to constantly loop my thinking on this. That's where my head is right now. I'll be interested to see what Tom Cotton has to say, assuming he's not pulled away. Dan Hoppen is a contributor to Fox, so they pulled him away, and they needed to pull him away. That's what happened there, just so you know. Putin said, we'll meet next time in Moscow. President said, well, that could cause me some problems. We'll see. I don't think it would cause him any problems. That's where Reagan went. He met Gorbachev. The people there loved him. That is Reagan. So I don't know that matters that much. But a meeting again, which raises the next question. Who will be at the next meeting? If there's a meeting. Will Zelensky be there? I don't know. It depends how much progress was actually made, I guess. Now, I have to assume that the word progress or productive, means that there must have been some concessions, yeah, from Putin. Otherwise, how productive could it be, right? I'm taking notes as I think this through because that's the way my mind works. So there must have been some concessions. No, it doesn't mean they're big concessions, but there must have been something. Or, if they give us this land over here, maybe we'll stop something over there. There's just really no way to know. Yeah, President's hoping a meeting again. Now, that is a positive step, right? Because he said, if there's no progress, I'm not meeting. Well, apparently there was progress. Nobody's more worried about this, or at least more curious about this, I assume, than the European countries and Zelensky. And I also assume that what's taking place now is there's an effort underway as I speak to communicate with them. And so that's why I think there'll be leaks coming out eventually, if not soon, at some point soon. Yeah. So that's my guess. Now, the reason as I talk to you, it's a little bit of a staccato, is because I'm looking at wire services and news as I speak to see if there's any leaks yet. Mr. Producer, you're looking too, right? Nothing yet. Some kind of understanding they reached on Ukraine or something like that. But again, that doesn't tell us anything. And I'm seeing nothing. But we will see something sooner than later, I think, before the end of the program. By the way, a reminder, we have two great Life, Liberty, and Levins this weekend. Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern. Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern. And I know you're going to like those. And, of course, we'll be at the Reagan Library on Sunday, meeting some wonderful people, too. We look forward to that. All of you who are going to attend, I want to thank all of you. What's that? So, ladies and gentlemen, people are struggling to figure out what to make of this. I'm not struggling at all. I think what happened in this meeting is that the president did some negotiation. Putin did some negotiation. There is not a ceasefire, but some of the issues were discussed. The president said there's some still other big issues out there that need to be discussed, that he's going to go back to Zelensky, go back to NATO, lay out some of the things that were discussed. I can't hear you, Rich. Okay, sorry. Sorry, folks. This is live radio. This is the way it goes. It's actually pretty cool. When I was young, I used to listen to it. I loved it when it was live and things are going on, and that's what's happening. I don't think there was any great, massive accomplishment that came out of this, and there never was going to be. There was never going to be. This is a first meeting. And we'll see how these other countries respond and how Ukraine responds. I think that's the bottom line. We're going to continue with the program. We're going to get into some other issues as well. We'll be right back. How many times have you told someone, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Now, that's great advice for most things, but not so much for a cell phone. See, over time, the battery life fades, the processor can't keep up, and it's fallen in the toilet perhaps one too many times. Fortunately, thanks to Pure Talk, your cell phone is something you can replace without feeling guilty. When you switch to Pure Talk this month, they're going to give you a Samsung Galaxy A36 for free with a $35 qualifying plan. Wow, just $35 a month for talk, text, and data, and a free Samsung phone, the scratch-resistant Gorilla Glass, and a battery that lasts all day. All on America's most dependable 5G network. Look, supporting companies like Pure Talk is a really good thing. You win by cutting your cell phone bill in half. They win by hiring more Americans and helping more veterans. Make the switch in as little as 10 minutes. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/LEVIN to get your free phone today. Again, that's puretalk.com/LEVIN. Switch to my wireless company, America's wireless company, Pure Talk.
America's most powerful conservative voice. The Mark Levin Show. Dial in now. 877-381-3811.
Now, you heard, those of you who were here, that press event. Now, I want you to hear what AP has to say about it. This is the Associated Press. President Trump and Russian President Putin said they reached an understanding on ending the war in Ukraine after meeting for about 2.5 hours on Friday, but offered no detail. Is that what you heard, Rich? That they reached an understanding on ending the war in Ukraine? That's serious. Did you hear that? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's not what I heard. But offered no details on what they agreed and left without answering question. In brief remarks, Putin said the pair had hammered out an understanding on Ukraine and warned Europe not to torpedo the nascent progress. Those are two different things that don't measure up. An understanding was hammered out, and then nascent progress. Nascent progress doesn't say there's an understanding. Nascent progress is we're just beginning the process. Speaking moments later, Trump said he'd yet to speak with Ukrainian President Zelensky, but that he'd be speaking to him and European leaders soon. He suggested that there hasn't been a deal yet. That's correct. And that's all they've got, and that's all there is. So what's happening now is reporters and hosts, except for me, are trying to make all their contacts at the White House, at the State Department, certain cabinet officials or other people to try and glean if there's anything that they can provide. Now, I'm telling you, like I told you a little bit ago, once this information is shared with NATO or shared with Zelensky, and once Putin starts to talk about it with his people, there are going to be leaks. And some of the leaks you need to be very careful about, like Russia's. Now, what Putin said there, at least as far as I can tell, is not precisely what Trump said. It's not precisely what Trump has said. Today's agreement. Trump has said he's not in a position. He's not the one to make an agreement. So that's interesting in and of itself. Now, this is interesting to me, in a sense. But here's the deal. We're going to keep monitoring the wire services and the rest of the news. If we start to get more information, I will pass it on to you. But I'm not going to speculate and I'm not going to guess. We will have Tom Cotton on the program, at least scheduled to be on the program in about 40 minutes. He's the chairman of the Armed Services Committee. He may or may not know something, and even if he does, he may not be able to speak about it, as best as we can tell. Let's see here. Somebody just wrote me. I'm looking. This is live and national. Some of the things people write to me. Statement of the obvious. So, ladies and gentlemen, what is obvious to me, let me be obvious about this, is there perhaps has been some progress. We don't really know. They got to check with NATO and Zelensky. And there is no ceasefire, certainly not yet. So that's where we are. So we'll see where this goes. You know, Richard Goldberg is an expert on foreign policy. He's an expert on the Middle East. He worked for President Trump in the first Trump White House. He's also provided support to the National Security Council back then and does now. He is an expert in this area. He was an expert with Iran, too. And as we sit here and wait for any leaks to take place, because there aren't any right now, I want to read something to you, because this is extremely troubling. And there's a lot of lessons in this, which I want to talk with you about as well. Here's what he writes. The UN's Hunger Games in Gaza are being exposed. We started the week learning that the Reuters CNN story on Hamas not diverting aid was based on a fabrication. In fact, U.S. aid internal briefings said no such thing, so they lied. As the week went on, we learned that the IPC had quietly changed its own guidelines to make it easier to declare a famine in Gaza. Because there is no famine in Gaza, and the IPC can't meet its own threshold for such a declaration, so it lowered the threshold. We end the week with news of an international aid worker blowing the whistle to the U.S. Aid Inspector General that the UN itself, including the World Food Program and UN OCHA, are inhibiting the distribution of aid through their unwillingness to coordinate with the IDF, possibly by order of the UN Secretary General himself. He says, I can personally attest, I've heard this last claim from 3 high-level sources close to the Gutierrez orbit, that is the UN Secretary, that the Secretary General has directed all UN agencies to try to collapse the GHF. This is the American/Israeli organization that's trying to feed the Palestinians in Gaza, and any aid paradigm that excludes Hamas's friends, that is UNRWA. So the Israel is starving Palestinians narrative is one of the greatest frauds ever perpetrated, and all while really abusing our taxpayer money. Very important to know. I think that's right. Now, why am I reading that now in the middle of this? Because you need to be very discerning about what you read in the press, what you hear in the press. Very discerning, including when it comes to this Russia-U.S. summit. Donald Trump was not hyping this thing from day one. He made it clear. He made that clear, that they were not going to do that, and he didn't. They had a press conference which demonstrated that they get along well, or at least they did in this meeting, and yet you can see some of the dislocation here. Today's agreement, Putin said twice, because I underscored it. President says there is no deal yet. Says it's productive. We've made some headway, but there's some big issues that are still sitting out there. We'll talk to NATO. We'll talk to Zelensky. It's ultimately up to them. He said there's some outstanding issues, bigger issues. But it was extremely productive, he added at the end. So I don't know what came of this, but it's a first meeting. The media are not reporting anything yet. Boy, this is the closest held secret. It's not going to stay that way. We will learn more information. And then you're going to have to be discerning, as am I, about people saying different things and what do they mean. Because they all can't be right. And some of this is positioning. Let's go to Jeff in Moonachi, Washington State. I think that's right. Mark Levin app, how are you?
Mark, it's great to talk to you. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. What do you make of this?
Well, right now, I think the president is one of the greatest chess players next to Reagan, if not right there with Reagan. What Reagan did with Gorbachev was phenomenal. It was epic. And Donald Trump, I think, maybe not yet, but I think he's going to have a breakthrough. And I think we're going to see that he is one of the greatest presidents of all time. And I think the left is going to lose their minds over it.
First of all, I think you're making a very important point, and I wrote it down here in my own notes to myself. This is the first move of what might be many moves. And then many moves might be, okay, we're done, we're not negotiating more. Or the many moves might be weeks down the road, which I think is your point. So I agree with that. And I think Trump is a realist. I think Putin is a killer and a liar. When you watch Trump, you can see the wheels. They were still turning in his head. Did you get that impression too, Jeff?
I didn't, but I'm going to have to go back and watch everything. I like that you said that. I'm
watching the clip now. It looks like he's thinking things through. And remember, he can't say a lot until he talks to the NATO guys and Zelensky too, right? He can't just lay it out there. Well, so we shall see.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, my friend. Thank you for your call. Steve, Chicago, Illinois, the great WLS. How are you? What do you make of this?
Oh, well, what I heard from Trump was it's not a deal until it's a deal. So I thought that was pretty direct and interesting.
But you also heard him say, and I wrote it down, extremely productive, great progress. You're right. Not a deal until there's a deal. And that is key, isn't it?
Definitely. I thought
things can be very productive, but if there's no deal, there's no deal. And there was never going to be a deal until he spoke to Zelensky and NATO, right?
Right. And then also interesting, which I'm sure none of the media will report, was when Putin said he agreed with Trump and said there wouldn't have been a war if it weren't for the previous administration.
You're right. AP ignored that already. And he basically said, I can confirm, right, that there wouldn't have been a war if he had been president.
Yeah. And also, I think, among the war itself, at least what I've heard and what I believe is Putin really was only able to align his coffers because Biden shut down our energy production and people in Europe had to start going back to Russia.
You're right. 100%. So he made Russia, he helped build Russia's oil sales. You're exactly right. And not only that, he also poured tons of money into Iran so they could sell their oil too to the communist Chinese. It's like they did everything ass backwards. And then you saw Afghanistan, of course, before that. What a disaster, no?
Yeah, it just shows how all those moves that they make, impacting our own energy production, impacting our own economy, work on a global scale, and bring us right to where we are.
Mm-hmm.
Having to fight for everything. But it's so exciting to talk to you, Mark. Thank you so much, and want to thank you for your book. And I only give one Christmas gift at Christmas time, and this year he made it easy on me. Everybody's getting your book, so
aren't you kind?
To give it. And don't worry, I don't have any little kids, so they're not going to miss their bikes or anything like that.
Well, you know what's amazing is you'll see when you read the book, things like this are really addressed in the book without addressing them specifically. So you'll see the approach that I took when I wrote it. Thanks a lot, Steve. God bless you, my friend. We're going to take a very short break. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
How many times have you told someone, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Now, that's great advice for most things, but not so much for a cell phone. See, over time, the battery life fades, the processor can't keep up, and it's fallen in the toilet perhaps one too many times. Fortunately, thanks to Pure Talk, your cell phone is something you can replace without feeling guilty. When you switch to Pure Talk this month, they're going to give you a Samsung Galaxy A36 for free with a $35 qualifying plan. Wow, just $35 a month for talk, text, and data, and a free Samsung phone, the scratch-resistant Gorilla Glass, and a battery that lasts all day. All on America's most dependable 5G network. Look, supporting companies like Pure Talk is a really good thing. You win by cutting your cell phone bill in half. They win by hiring more Americans and helping more veterans. Make the switch in as little as 10 minutes. Go to puretalk.com/Levin. That's puretalk.com/Levin to get your free phone today. Again, that's puretalk.com/Levin. Switch to my wireless company, America's wireless company, Pure Talk. One thing I put in my notes here, I wasn't going to mention it, but I am going to mention it. The president didn't look really happy to me. Did he? To you, Rich, to be honest? You don't think so either? He didn't speak very long. He didn't look ultra happy to me. He just didn't. And I think Putin was spinning a little bit there, too. But he didn't look ultra happy to me. That's just one man's opinion. I'm curious to know what you folks think too. In fact, when Putin was speaking, I wrote down here, the president looks almost angry. But I'd rather say he didn't look happy. How about that? I think that's right. Now, I can only listen during the breaks and watch the news on my screen during the breaks. And people are speculating, and no leaks yet. But let me go through this again as people come and go. I thought Putin was putting a bigger smiley face on this than Trump. And again, I could be wrong. But that's how I saw it. And he talked about today's agreement twice. Twice. The president said there's no deal until there's a deal. And he said it was productive. Later on, he said extremely productive. But we're going to talk to NATO. We're going to talk to Zelensky. It's ultimately up to them. Made some great progress. There's outstanding issues, bigger issues. Putin did say that there wouldn't have been a war. There wouldn't have been a war if Trump had been president. The media is ignoring that. He said, I can confirm that. So there is that, too. And as I just commented to you and you folks who watched it, you can make your own determination. I don't think the president looked ultra happy. I really don't. In other words, he didn't look ultra happy at you-know-who, Putin. And this will all be processed and thought about, and when the calls are made, you'll start to see the leaks and so forth. Patrick, Princeton, Minnesota, XM Satellite, what do you make of all this?
Well, I was a Arctic Light Infantry guy, Alpha Company, 3rd Battalion, 3rd Infantry, Old Guard
first of all,
during the Reagan years.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we were yes, sir, greatest country in the world. Our mission was to defend Alaska, okay? So Putin's an old school apparatchik. He's just doing this dance. He's not gonna capitulate because he has to save face. All the things he's invested in this failed war of his, he has to save face, right? So he's not going to capitulate until he knows that things are just going to get worse for him. He's got to cut his losses. Mm-hmm. And I think the B-2 flying overhead and the F-35s, I think Trump's figuring it out that he's an old school apparatchik. You got to communicate with his lizard brain, you know?
Yeah. Well, thanks for your service. I think you got it right. Thank you, brother. We'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. You know, I continue to think about these things and look at my notes. And I wrote to myself, first round, second round likely more crucial. Does that make sense to you, Mr. Producer? And the reason is, at that point, if there is a second round, there'll be input from Zelensky and NATO. The other thing is, even though Putin is a monster, the question really is, I'm going to put it bluntly to you, America, how much longer can this go on without even his inner circle starting to turn on him? Do you understand what I mean by turn on him, Rich? I don't mean give an opinion. I mean take him out. Yeah. Take him out. And still have tariffs that can be used. India and China still have secondary tariffs on Russia that can be used. And I've gone back and I looked carefully in my notes on what the president said. On the one hand, he seemed optimistic. On the other hand, he said there's some big issues still that have to go forward and so forth. And I'm sure those are territorial. So we shall see. That's all we know. We don't know another damn thing. Let's be honest. Until things begin to leak or something like that, we just don't know anything else. But as I looked at his face, and I've looked at it again online here, he doesn't look thrilled to me. He just doesn't look thrilled to me. And Putin looks like he always does. You know, it looks like he had like 3 Nancy Pelosi facelifts. His face looks like it's frozen in the constipation position, Mr. Producer. Something to that effect. What did you send me here, Rich? Let me see if I can pull it up. Hold on, ladies and gentlemen. Give me a second. Come on, computer. Don't fail me now. Stick with me. Stick with me. You're not going to learn anything on TV. There's nothing going on there. Okay, here we go. Okay. I am interested to know your take, folks. There's been a couple of smart calls so far that have... let's go to Scott Fairfield, Connecticut, WABC. What do you make of what you heard and saw, Scott?
Hi, Mark. Here's my read. The reason our magnificent president was distrait, as the French say, is because he's calculating, he's thinking. He was not obviously pleased with the thug, but the thug doesn't understand. is that what he doesn't understand is that Trump is a far better chess player than he is, but he has so many things to juggle that he's thinking ahead. He wasn't in that press conference for any other reason to get back on his airplane and get to work. And he's not happy. He is displeased, but he is managing a nuclear power run by a criminal, and therefore he is planning how to deal with the situation. It's not complicated, in my humble opinion, because Donald Trump, who has more energy than any other soul on the planet Earth, he was thinking. He was thinking, and he's calculating, and he's not pleased, and he's going to deal with the situation because that's what the man does.
That is a great point. Very well said, Scott. I appreciate it. Thank you, buddy. All right, let's continue. Let's go to Steve, Las Vegas, Nevada, on XM satellite. Steve, go right ahead.
Well, I think we need to look for the same thing the president will be looking for, and that's confirmation that there's any lessening of missile fire, drones, artillery towards Ukraine.
If there's what, sir? If there's what towards Ukraine? I'm sorry.
If the Russians are continuing to fire...
in other words, drones, their conduct over the next few weeks or days.
The next few days.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be the same old President talks to me. He just keeps on loading on Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point,
I think it's going to be the next few days, 2-3 days. He keeps on loading. I don't think it's going to make a difference what the Ukrainians say or the Ukrainians. I think he will go to sanctions on China and India. I really think that's the only thing that's going to sober him up. I was worried today. Putin's a murderer and an assassin. The Russians are famous for lethal poison handshakes, bumping into people. I was scared to death today he might shake hands with our guy and assassinate him. He's really a tough cookie.
Great point, Steve. Thank you. Oh, man, really great points. Let's go to Carl, Lake Somerset, Illinois, XM satellite. What do you make of this?
Hey, Mark, great to talk with you, a longtime fan. You are the best, and thanks. Compliments to your calls. My opinion is very simple. Trump went into that meeting looking for one thing. He asked Putin, do you want peace? And if Putin said yes, then all they got to do is try to figure out how to put it together. And the reason Trump was, his demeanor maybe have not been so happy or go lucky is because Trump knows that he could put the deal together, but he's stalled because he's got other parties to deal with. And he's got to pass that on to the other parties, but if it was just up to him, he could make the deal. That's why he wasn't happy.
You don't think he wasn't happy because of Putin?
Well, listen, whether he likes Putin or not is
not likes. Putin may be making it too tough. In other words, Trump could be thinking, I got to go back to NATO and Zelensky, and no way they're going to buy into what this guy's demanding.
Right, because he's got to come up with the terms. But if Putin doesn't want peace, then there is no terms that are going to happen. But if Putin said, yeah, I'll agree to peace, and started throwing out some issues, and Trump started to walk on some of those issues, and then eventually they got to the issues where they couldn't resolve them. Now Trump knows he's got.
Trump knows what? Why are we losing people? You're going, I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. Is that what's going to happen again with the damn phone system? I hope not. Let us go to John, Kansas City, Kansas, the great KCMO. Let's hope John's able to talk through. Sorry about that, buddy. Go ahead, John.
Can you hear me, Professor Levin?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I know it's been about a month since I last talked to you, but as a former Army intelligence sergeant, I got 4 quick points on this that I do not like about this. I randomly came across Catalyson's interview with Putin a couple days ago. And Putin looked a lot more squirmier, less talkative, everything else like this. Today, it looked like he knew he was playing the long game because he can just kiss butt a little bit, sit behind the 8 ball, and come out in the long term. And that's why he wouldn't shut up when he first came out and took the mic and then just kept on rambling because the final 2 points on this is that he won his re-election back in March 2024. He doesn't have term limits anymore. They got rid of that. He's 72 years old. He can go for until 2030 is his next re-election. And then after that, I mean, heck, after
he can go to 2036 by the time he's done. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So after Trump's done in January 2029, his next 2 options pretty much are either my man Ron DeSantis out of Florida or J.D. Vance, 2 young guys under the age of 50. And he's going to be 80 at that time, and he can play his cards however he wants to, and he can just keep playing his cards. I do not trust this man. I do not like this man, and I do not see any good things that came out of this day. I saw Putin with the absolute straight shot to go after and have the long and narrow on this one.
All right, my friend. Thank you, John. Okay, we're going to take a break. I can only tell you Senator Cotton is scheduled to come on. Those of you who I haven't taken who are on the board, hang in there. I will get to you. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, it could be that the president was tired. He just flew in there today, and maybe he's not displeased. Maybe he's very pleased with what took place. That could be the case, too. We have with us Senator Tom Cotton, chairman of the committees that actually matter. Senator, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Mark. Thanks for having me on tonight.
It's a weird interview, I'm afraid. I'm just interested in your take. There wasn't much on the table there, but what is your take?
Well, President Trump had pretty measured expectations. He said all week long that he did not expect to have any kind of peace deal. At most, maybe a ceasefire. President Putin of Russia did not agree to that. I think once again proving that he's the obstacle to peace, just like he's the cause of this war, having launched the unprovoked aggression against Ukraine in the first place. But it's clear, Mark, from the way President Trump interacted with President Putin today, if you contrast it to the way President Biden and President Putin interacted 4 years ago, that we have a president that's once again respected and at some level feared by Vladimir Putin. It's not a coincidence, for instance, Mark, that Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine when Barack Obama was president, when Joe Biden was president, but not when Donald Trump was, as Putin himself said today. President Trump has said that they laid the groundwork for some potential next steps. I think if those involve sitting down with both President Zelensky of Ukraine and President Putin of Russia, that maybe could lead to a ceasefire. But to do so, President Trump is going to continue to support Ukraine by providing weapons to NATO that can provide them to Ukraine. And I think keeping the threat of sanctions over the head of Russia as well. The only way I believe you'll ever get President Putin to reach a negotiated settlement is if he believes he has more risk on the battlefield and to his economy by continuing the war than the risk he faces at the negotiating table.
Do you find it interesting? You've been around a while, so there haven't been any leaks of any kind so far? I assume when they start briefing NATO and Zelensky and Russia wants to spin, it won't be long until we see some of that, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, and Mark, you could also see official readouts once they're back on Air Force One. I believe they plan to fly back to Washington in very short order and land in the middle of the night. I would expect President Trump may come speak to reporters, as he often does on Air Force One, as he did briefly on the way there, to give a little bit more color on what happened and what they discussed. It's clear, though, that I think President Trump drew the line where he said he would. He wasn't going to try to negotiate a peace settlement. He certainly wasn't going to try to swap away Ukrainian land or make any other concessions without President Zelensky involved and the European leaders engaged. And that's exactly what happened. Maybe President Putin thought he'd be able to play President Trump like a fiddle the way he did Joe Biden, but he obviously had another thing coming.
Mm-hmm. So it's pretty clear then you think there's going to be a second meeting, right?
would assume so, Mark. I mean, if there's not, President Trump has been pretty clear that he plans to impose what he calls severe consequences. And the most severe consequence that we haven't imposed yet are sanctions, and especially secondary sanctions on Russia's oil exports. Russia is still exporting a lot of oil to countries like India and like China. That export revenue is what funds, in no small part, their war machine. So we still have a lot of different levers to pull. Russia doesn't have that much leverage left. So if Vladimir Putin is not willing to continue negotiations and ultimately sit down with President Zelensky in direct talks, then I think that you can expect those severe consequences to be imposed. I support that, and the large majority of the Senate, even Democrats, for once, support President Trump doing that.
Mm-hmm. If you were interviewing Donald Trump, because Sean's interviewed him and that's going to be played, or interviewing him at 9 tonight Eastern time, and you know he can't answer certain questions, obviously, what would you want to know about this meeting?
Yeah, I probably would just want to ask him what he thinks the next steps are and how serious Vladimir Putin is about any kind of peace agreement. Again, I don't think Vladimir Putin would reach a peace agreement out of the goodness of his heart. This is a man who continuously is bombing apartment buildings and killing women and children. But I do think that with enough leverage and pressure applied to Russia, that Putin would be willing to sit down. If he thinks that he faces greater risk on the battlefield than he does at the negotiating table, he'd be willing to sit down. And for all we know, Mark, it may have been President Trump's plan to lay out those consequences to him today in direct face-to-face conversation. That's something, no matter how good a job Steve Witkoff or Marco Rubio or Scott Bessent are doing, you can really only do in a direct one-on-one head-of-state conversation. So you make sure that foreign leader understands that you mean business. And I think if there's anything that we know about Donald Trump after watching him for 10 years and watching him in his first year back in office in Gaza or with Iran, is that when he says something, he means business. But he may have had to get that across to Vladimir Putin today.
Do you think some of this will depend on what Putin does in the next few days or weeks militarily with Ukraine? Do you think that'll matter?
Yeah, obviously, Mark. I mean, negotiations are affected by the battlefield realities. There's been some progress on Russia's front, but there's also some assessments that progress is very tenuous and may even be opening up their flanks to Ukrainian counterattack. This is all, again, though, kind of a tactical level progress or retrograde. There's no major strategic breakthroughs for almost 3 years now in Ukraine. So I don't expect there will be a huge amount of difference on the battlefield, but you can never rule it out.
But do you think Donald Trump will see if they're still pounding away at Kiev and these areas and so forth over the next few days? Because remember, whatever was discussed, he's taking back to NATO. He's taking back to Zelensky. And if Putin just keeps pounding and pounding and pounding the people there, I don't think NATO and Zelensky are going to be incredibly open-minded, do you?
No, Mark, and I don't think President Trump is either. And for that matter, Mark, neither is the First Lady. I think you recall the president saying a few weeks ago that he'll have a phone call with Vladimir Putin. It'll go so great, and he'll use all these perfect words. And then he goes and tells his wife, and the First Lady says, "Oh, really?" Because he just shot up another apartment building in Kyiv. Mm-hmm. So putting aside the relatively modest progress on either side on the front lines in the east, if Russia continues these atrocious assaults on civilians in Ukraine, then no, I think you could see an even accelerated level of support for Ukraine's military via NATO and sanctions on Russia. I think that ball is really in Vladimir Putin's court, because it's clear that President Trump and, as he himself said, the First Lady have had it with that.
I can't imagine the inner circle is going to tolerate this forever. I mean, they've had 1 million casualties. Their military's been beaten up hugely. Their economy is almost on its back. You're going to have to rely on North Korean soldiers that aren't trained or being gobbled up on the front lines. I mean, how much longer can this go on?
Yeah, it is really straining Russia. I don't think we can ever underestimate Vladimir Putin's appetite for Ukraine, but there are deep internal strains inside of Russia because of this war.
All right, Senator, thank you for taking some time. God bless you. Take care of yourself. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin, tough as hell.
That's why I like Mark Levin. And I'm not sure a lot of people like him. He's tough as hell. But I like him. I love them.
Call in now. 877-381-3811.
All right. Let us go to Mike, Maynard, Iowa, XM Satellite. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Mark. How are you?
Okay. Go right ahead, please.
I was watching the press conference, and it was really ambiguous. Neither one said much of anything. Both of them, it was in the brevity, and they didn't take any questions. It could have been an optimistic talk. They could have talked about ancillary items like let's form an agreement and work together in the Arctic, which would be intriguing because that could possibly block out China. It could have been on restarting nuclear arms agreements. I don't think Zelensky is going to budge because I don't think he's going to give up Donbass. I don't think he's going to give up Luhansk and Donetsk. And then I was thinking, well, if I was cynical, the conversation could have went south and not much happened. And it could have went like this. The dialogue, Trump, strange as it may seem, they give ball players nowadays very peculiar names. Putin, funny names. Trump, nicknames. Now, on the St. Louis team, we have who's on first, what's on second, I don't know is on third.
Right.
Putin, that's what I want to find out. I want you to tell me the names of the fellows on the St. Louis team.
Mm-hmm.
Trump, I'm telling you, who's on first, what's on second.
I know, we heard this. It's an old line, but where are you going with this?
Well, it could have went like Abbott and Costello's who's on first, and it could have been that productive if I was to be cynical.
Mm-hmm. But you're right, it was, at least coming out, it was intentionally ambiguous and somewhat contradictory, because Putin's there talking about we have an agreement. He said it twice, and Trump says, no, we don't have a deal till we have a deal. But I think Putin's probably spinning for the press, and I think Trump is not. He's saying, I think we made some progress, but I got to talk to these other people too. All right, Mike, great call. Wonderful call. Diane, Roslyn, New Mexico. How are you? On the Mark Levin app.
I'm just fine. Thank you. I listen to you every day.
Thank you.
I do. And I like it that you're outspoken because I'm like that myself.
Very good.
Anyway, I think that I think that Putin is, he's like a fox. He's dumb like a fox. He knows what he's doing. He just went to that meeting. He had no intentions of peace. I'm telling you, he just wanted to see what was up with Trump and what Trump was going to offer. He's going to try to put Trump off until he can't, until he's almost out of the White House, and then he's going to bounce on Ukraine again and try to get more territory. I think we need to jump in there and get it done with him. And his.
Well, I don't think we're going to jump in there. I think the best we'll do, and it's pretty good, is we will sell the armaments to Europe to give to Ukraine. But if you mean jump in there, we have many economic tools that can bring them to their knees. We really do. And that would be these massive tariffs on the oil purchases by India and China. That would bring him to his knees. It really would. And the secondary direct sanctions on his economy, because his economy is in very bad shape right now.
Well, I think we need to do it sooner than later. I mean, yeah. Mm-hmm. I think.
All right, my friend.
I never felt. He doesn't want peace. I never felt like he wanted.
Yeah, he's a monster. I agree with you. I don't see that coming out of this in the end. I really don't. And I don't think he cares. I said to Senator Cotton, I said, well, how much longer can this go on? And the truth is it'll go as long as he's got people to throw at the front, because he doesn't care, is my guess. All right, Diane, thank you for your call. Appreciate it. Let's take some more calls here. Let us go to Pat, Alexandria, Virginia, the great WMAL. Pat, go right ahead.
Hi, Mark. I think Putin doesn't want the war to end. I think he's got the people behind him. You know, we've been expanding NATO, you know, into his backyard. I think the Ukrainians, you know, they've been poor for a long time. They've got all that corruption. They don't want to end.
So you think he invaded because we added 2 countries to NATO?
No. I think Putin loves Russia. He doesn't like NATO getting closer and closer, and he wants Ukraine. He wants it, and the Ukrainians don't want to give him anything. And you know, they're going to keep fighting until the last man. It almost seems.
Who is going to keep fighting to the last man?
Well, there's a lot of other factors too.
No, I'm asking you, who is? I'm confused. Who is going to keep fighting to the last man?
He doesn't want to end the war either.
Who doesn't want to end the war? Who are you talking about?
Putin and Zelensky.
Well, Zelensky clearly does. He's offered to come to multiple ceasefires and negotiate with Putin.
Ukraine that loved being Soviet Union. They loved the power. I think a lot of people in Ukraine like the Soviet Union.
You know, you're a Putinoid. That's all you are. A lot of people love the Soviet Union. There were 15 captive nations. None of them loved the Soviet Union. As soon as it collapsed, they all left. Every damn one of them. Now, some of them have been taken over by dictators that are close to Putin. But the Ukrainians are fighting like hell for their independence. They can leave the country if they wish, but they're fighting like hell. And they're doing things that nobody thought they could do. So why do you say they want to be part of Russia? They clearly don't want to be part of Russia.
Wait, you heard about the Ukrainians shooting part of Ukraine, right? The apartment building, you know. Okay.
So Ukraine shot its own building. Look, you're calling the wrong show. If you want to call Bannon or Tucker, that's fine. But your kind of bullcrap doesn't fly here, okay? You want to push that Putin crap, you can push it somewhere else. No, the Ukrainians are not blowing up their own buildings. They're not. But you need help, psychological help. Thank you. Now get lost. Get off my phone, you jerk. The Ukrainians are blowing up their own buildings. Did you know that, Mr. Producer? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. They want to be part of Russia. They're just badly misunderstood. I knew where he was going. And it's NATO's fault. NATO's fault. Because Finland wants to join NATO. Why? Because when you read what Putin wrote, the Baltic states are in his sight. So they're thinking, we got a police force. We barely have a military here. They were part of the Soviet Union. They want nothing to do with it. Yeah, listen to that moron. He's calling the wrong show. All right, let's go. Let's see here. Frank in Star, South Carolina, XM Satellite. How are you?
How you doing, sir?
I'm all right, thank you.
Well, now I'm kind of scared to talk after you burned down that guy's barn.
No, he needed to be burned down.
Well, here's the thing.
Do you think the Ukrainians are blowing up their own buildings?
No, sir. No, sir.
That's
no,
kind
I
of
don't.
stupid.
I think you're a patriot. I think you're a strong, tough, and not a man to be trifled with. And I listen to you when I monitor you from time to time. But you know, I'm a truck driver, so
I love my truck drivers. You know that, Frank.
Well, I'm a veteran too.
Wow.
And I think you do a lot of good. So here's the thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question on this. President Trump with Putin, they walked out there, and I seen this video. It drew a tear to my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Overhead had a B-2 bomber and F-22s. Did you see that?
That was fantastic. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Even Putin kind of looked down like, okay, you got me. That was badass, you know?
I agree with you. That was a great move. Frank, don't get mad. I got a hard break. I'm sorry, buddy. Call again. Please, please do. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
All right, I mentioned our program Saturday and Sunday. Now, I'll be gone, at least from where I am, for the next 2 or 3 days. I hope you'll check out On Power, Amazon.com. You know, when you do your shopping over the weekend, many of you like to go to Walmart or Target or Sam's Club or those kind of stores, or maybe you like to go to Barnes & Noble like I do, or your local independent bookstore if you still have one. The book is there. If you're traveling, going through an airport, the book is there at Hudson and the other stores there that have them and so forth. So it's ubiquitous. I hope you'll grab it. It's the perfect book for these times right now to help explain what's taking place, actually. I've got a lot of great callers here. Do I have any time, Richard? No. I don't. Sorry, folks, but we'll get back at it next week. We go to America every Friday in honor of you. Here we go. Have a wonderful weekend. The week officially ends now. The weekend begins right now. Don't forget Life, Liberty, and Levin. Set your DVR tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern. Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. We do that show for you. Don't forget, grab your copy of On Power. I know you're going to love it. You truck drivers out there, trust me. We salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, emergency personnel, our truckers. Good night, Spritey. Good night, Griffey and Pepsi. Good night, Smokey and Zelda. Good night, Indy and Pat and Rory. Good night, Gigi. Good night, Marty. Good night, Barney. Good night, Dad. Good night, Mom and Leo. Good night, Joe. Good night, Bernard. Good night, Teddy. Good night, Lou. Good night, all the great patriots out there. And we will see you over the weekend. I will see you at the Reagan Library on Sunday. Very excited about it. Please set your DVRs. Don't forget to watch Life, Liberty, and Levin. Grab on Power. And just have a fantastic weekend, okay? See you next week. God bless.